Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Draft Capital here on the Nothing But Net channel on Dash Radio. I'm Stephen Gillespie, one of the co-hosts here, and joining me today is a very special guest. He is a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, does a lot of draft coverage for them. You guys might know him as at MavsDraft. Richard Stayman. Richard, how you doing today, man?
Hey, I'm doing well. It's nice to be on here. I love what you and Chris do, and I know we've talked a lot on Twitter, so really excited to be on and talk some NBA draft.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So just for the listeners, I can't imagine anybody who doesn't know you. I mean, you're all over draft Twitter. I mean, I see you on there all the time, and like you said, we've developed a little bit of a rapport on the internet, and it's finally cool to be able to sit down, virtually across from each other and talk about a few prospects that we're going to be focusing on today and throughout the cycle in general. But for those who may not know, if you could just please indulge them a little bit how you kind of got started covering the draft and, a little bit about what you do for Locked On.
Yeah, so it starts all the way back in 2004 when I was 10 years old. I I really liked the 2003 class, being a 9-year-old, and then the Magic, my hometown team, had the number one pick for they had a tough decision, Dwight Howard or Emeka Okafor, and that really drew my interest from there. I watched every single NBA draft since. I haven't missed one since 2004. And in 2017, instead of my whole thing with it wasn't ever intended to be like more than just like tweeting thoughts. But like in 2017, I was dating a girl who all her friends followed me on Twitter and stuff, and I was like, well, that's half my following, and a lot of these people don't care about sports. Like she wasn't that big into sports or anything like that, and I was like, I'm just going to create a new account that's just for like the Mavs and the draft. So I called it MavsDraft, whatever. And lo and behold, like it's evolved way more than I ever wanted. Donovan Mitchell like saved my career.
That's pretty cool though, man. I mean, a lot of people don't have a neat origin story like that to where it's just like, I'm just going to kind of side hustle my drafts, especially, for as long as you've been doing it. And you refer back to that Dwight Howard draft. It's funny that we can look back at that now and be like, hey, that was a tough decision. You know what I mean? But now it's just like a lot of people don't even like a lot of fans today probably don't even remember Emeka Okafor. But I mean, that you're right. That was a, neck and neck race for a little while, but here we still have Dwight Howard contributing to championships and all that fun stuff, man. So that's pretty neat. So, Richard, today I'm entitling the show Draft Talk with Mavs Draft. It just kind of rolls off the tongue. I like that a lot. And we're going to be talking, like I said, about a few prospects. But before we get going, Richard, another thing that you and I have in common is that our shows are brought to you by Built Bar. Unlike all the other bars out there that either taste like old Play-Doh or a piece of cardboard, when you eat a Built Bar, you will think that you're cheating on your diet with a delicious chocolate dessert. If your kids find out how good these things are, I should know I have 4 of them. You're gonna have to buy more because they're gonna be begging for them. They have great flavors like cookies and cream, double chocolate, strawberry, peanut butter brownie, and much, much more. They also have a mystery flavor that if you guess correctly, you can win a prize. Just go to built.com, enter in promo code off the ball, all caps, no spaces, at checkout, and you will get a 10% discount. Richard, like I said, Locked On Podcast Network, you guys are sponsored by Built Bar as well. Are you a big fan of them? Do you actually eat them on the regular?
I am addicted to those things, and I'm not just saying that. Like they sent us like when I started, they're like, hey, since we sponsor, like here's what we are. Like they gave like a free sample, and dude, I ran out of that sample so quick, and I was so mad at myself for having no discipline. The cookies and cream is like, I had protein bars here before, and I was like, nah, it can't be that good, and it blew me away.
Nice. Yeah. We have a few guys on the network. One of our guys, Kenneth, he's famously getting ready for a wedding. That was hard for me to say for some reason, but anyway, he's getting ready for a wedding, and he and his wife, I guess, in an effort to look their best on their big day, they are eating nothing but Built Bars basically, and they rave about it all the time. So, Richard, we're gonna get going on the first of the 4 draft picks or potential draft picks that we're going to be talking about today. Harrison Ingram, this is a guy that you wanted to talk about in particular. I've been watching film on him a lot lately. I'm really into his game a lot. I see the appeal on why you might like him, but what in particular stands out when you're evaluating Harrison Ingram's game?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's a wing who plays a very unconventional way that a wing does. Like he's not very athletic. His jump shot is a little bit slow. He's stiff defensively, but he also is an excellent rebounder, really good finisher at the rim, super crafty, gets all these reverse layups. And also his playmaking is just so remarkable. Like he just has insane vision. He's only 6'5", 6'6", so he's not going to be like the best sized wing, but he's almost like a new age. I say new age, like Kyle Anderson. I don't even know if Kyle Anderson's 30. Sounds weird like that. But like, the whole timeline of NBA players is
he's kind of getting to be like an elder statesman of sorts,
He's the veteran on the Grizzlies. Like, and I'm looking this up now. Yeah, he's why does it not? He's 28 years old, and he's probably one of the oldest players on the team.
That's insane. Yeah. Yeah, I like Ingram a lot. You mentioned that he's about 6'6". In the information that I was able to get a hold of, it looks like he's anywhere from that 6'6" to 6'8" range, about 225. I want to read off a few places that coming into the season that had the big boards and projections and things like that, and where some people had them placed. I also just released my own top 80 over at my Substack, and I have him 13th overall. I really, really like him. But on NBA Draft Room, he was ranked 27th. He wasn't listed on Tankathon, DraftNet, Bleacher Report, or ESPN. The Athletic had him at 41. USA Today's For the Win have him at 30. And Sports Illustrated have him at 45th. Right now, he's averaging close to about 12 points per game, 7 rebounds, 3 assists, about a half a block, a little over half a steal, 42% from the floor, almost 35% from deep, and about 78% from the free throw line. So, Richard, when I was looking at a few games for him, I really like that, Anderson comparison that you threw out, because he does have a lot of playmaking ability. And at Stanford, I noticed in a few games in particular that he would make passes that he just doesn't have the teammates that I think are ready to accept those types of passes. Even that 3 assists in college probably prorates to about 5 or 6 at the next level if he's given about the same usage, right? But at Stanford, a lot of their bigs just don't have the hands to handle, kind of passes where he'll look off a defender and feed him. And that was one thing that stuck out to me. You talked about the athleticism. I think that's going to be kind of a polarizing, fixture in his analysis moving forward. What about his physical, profile do you think might hold him back a little bit?
Yeah, I think that measurement is going to be the key thing for him, whatever his height and wingspan end up as. I think he has long arms. Like I saw him now 2 weeks ago in Waco against Baylor, and you can tell he has pretty long arms. Like I don't know, I've gotten figured out how to do it. I personally have ridiculously long arms, so I use myself as like a measuring stick. I have a +6 wingspan, but not about me.
That's highly valuable. You might get a 10-day
if I could do literally anything other than shoot. But and I was telling, but no, really though, like my thing with Ingram is just like he needs to have probably a 6'9", 6'10" wingspan at the minimum. Anything short of that is really going to hurt his stock as already an undersized wing, depending on what he measures out as. And then also, like I said, the athleticism, it shows on both ends. He can't explode past defenders on the drive. And then also, I think he's a little bit stiff on defense because of it. Like he's very beatable on that first step.
Yeah, that's very true. And one of the things that I noticed on the defensive end, I think it's going to be probably the biggest negative against him, Richard, is that he doesn't really have a lot of on-ball ability, I feel like. I think that he could fit a team's defense, but, we're going to be talking about a guy here in a little bit who he actually faced off against not too long ago in Waco. And he's going to have a hard time staying in front of really high-end athletes. And at that position, that's going to be almost on a nightly basis, right, at the NBA. And I think that he can, kind of like Anderson, he'll have to learn angles, because like Anderson, Harrison Ingram is a very intelligent player. He has so much feel, and that was one of the things I tweeted out today when I did my kind of film analysis on him, is that he knows where people are going to be. And you see him on the defensive end, right? Like he'll point out areas on the floor where his teammates kind of need to fill in, and when they switch, he'll rotate over, no problem. He can fit a team style, but that one-on-one matchup, I think at that next level, Richard, that's going to be kind of hard for him to keep up with.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the biggest test to how we'll know how that translates is pretty much once conference play starts next month. I mean, think about some of the wings and similar position players that'll be guarding him that he's going to go against. Benedict Mathurin at Arizona. It's going to be a tough one. That'll tell a lot about his defense. Then you also have Johnny Juzang, same thing. He'll tell a lot about his defense. And then on the other end, he's going to go against Luther Muhammad, one of the best defenders in the Pac-12 at Arizona State.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to have a lot of tests. I'm trying to think if I forgot anybody else. Noah Williams at Washington State. Like, there's a lot of competition on the wings, and conference play is going to be very telling for him. And I think kind of the Baylor game too, because like you said, there's a certain someone who I won't name yet that we'll talk about that showed a little bit of what the worry could be.
Yeah, we'll go ahead and here before we roll into he who shall not be named yet. We'll talk about Harrison Ingram. Do you have kind of a projection, Richard? Just kind of share with us a little bit on your own personal philosophy here. This early on, do you have like a functional big board or like a player ranking that you look at, or do you like have tiers set up right now? Like, where are you feeling about Harrison Ingram's kind of draft value right now?
So I got burned. What was it? 2 years ago, so bad from doing a draft board before New Year's. I won't do a draft board anymore before New Year's just for the sake of accuracy. If I want like clicks or something, I get it. Like, not saying like every big board is clicks. For me, it's like I know I don't have the grasp. And at that point, I'm just BSing everybody else, which isn't like, what I want to do. Some people have a lot better of an idea. I cannot figure it out. I just started figuring out TCU. I went to the game last night. It was my 4th game I've been to, and I just started clicking. Like, so for me, these guys have played 8 games. I'm still hesitant to make hard stances that could really be used against me. I don't want to make too many preconceived notions, but to kind of grasp that, I had like Nico Mannion, number 3 at this point in the 2019 part of the 2019-20 season, which crazy enough was a year before the draft. But so like things are obviously a lot different. And for me, it's like, I don't know. I think you learn a lot more in conference play. You don't know, some teams haven't played anybody, but if I had to put him right now, I would say probably in the 20s is where I would put him. I've only ranked players who I feel very confident in that I can keep projecting them and that it won't stray too far from where I have. So it's just kind of a list and then like 25 people who I've ranked.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, and everybody's got their own different philosophies and stuff like that. We're kind of getting to know each other a little bit here, Richard. But that's all fair and good. But I am very much glad that you wanted to discuss Harrison Ingram today, because that forced me to kind of watch him a little bit more, and I was digging what I was seeing. Now this next guy, we'll go ahead and say the name that we were alluding to 3 or 4 or 5, 12 times earlier. Kendall Brown. This is like the draft Twitter darling right now. I don't think that anyone has a negative thing that they can say against Kendall Brown. And that's not to kind of, that's not a backhanded compliment or anything like that. It's just everyone loves Kendall Brown. And I think a lot of it has to do with that there wasn't a projection of him being this good this early on a really talented team in Baylor. And he's showing out. He doesn't have a huge offensive role, and the stuff that he does do, he does very well. A lot of off-ball movement, cutting, things of that nature. Very gifted athletically, which is very aesthetically pleasing. People love to see him run and jump. And then defensively, he's no slouch on that end either. So, Richard, you wanted to talk about Kendall Brown. I believe on Draft Capital, this might be the 2nd or 3rd time that we're going to be discussing him. And I can't get enough. I love him. I have him, well within my top 10 right now. Why are you so interested in Kendall Brown, Richard? And just go ahead and tell us what you see when you watch him.
Yeah, so he was a guy who I did some high school digging around August. I started looking at him, and I fell in love with his game. I only saw EYBL tape, so it wasn't like I wasn't sure how much of it was legit. But I mean, he's a wing shooting 72% through 8 games. Like that, like the small sample size aside, 8 games, 72% is a wing. Like, I don't know what the standings are, but I wouldn't be shocked if he's top 5 field goal percentage. And on top of that, it's not like they're playing any like slouches of a team. Like they played Central Arkansas, I think, who they usually open the year against him. They played them 3rd game. They played like the first 3 games were rough. They played Incarnate Wood, Nichols, and Central Arkansas, but Nichols isn't bad. But after that, like he played Stanford, Arizona State, VCU, and Michigan State. And in those games, he shot averaged over 72%. He averaged 76% from the field and 79% from 2. And that was on 7 attempts per game. The crazy stuff is like that may not even be his biggest selling point. Like he does everything on the basketball court. He gets steals, he gets blocks. He doesn't really turn the ball over. He play makes, he rebounds. He does everything. Like you said, he's high IQ cutter. Like he moves off ball so much. He's a perfect glue guy.
For sure, and I don't think that I can't think of a single team right now, Richard, in the NBA that he does not get
Yep.
meaningful minutes come day one. And that's high praise, and I know people have different takes. It's not just hyperbole on my end. I'm watching a guy who that he might have right now, Richard. I argued this on my article for my big board. He might have the most clearly defined role out of any other player in this draft class. I mean, we can kind of hypothesize and think about and how neat it would be for your Palos, your Chets, your Patrick, your Patrick Baldwin Juniors, Jabari Smiths, your Hardys, your Ivies, all that. But Kendall Brown, he just you almost feel like exactly what he's going to be in the NBA, and I think that that's part of his appeal.
Yeah, I mean, he's a clear cut. Like, you can make him work at literally any capacity. And I realized when I said glue guy, I kind of undersold him, but like the glue guy sticks 10 plus years in the league. So that's a worst case scenario.
Yeah, no doubt. And there's nothing wrong with being a glue guy, and he's probably not going to go in and be a very high usage, first or second option. But I mean, players just look at how hot the Phoenix Suns are right now. You got guys like Mikal Bridges and Cam Thompson that kind of fit a similar style, so to speak. Those two guys have, higher end strengths in some areas and probably lower end weaknesses compared to Kendall Brown. But those are guys just off the cuff that come to mind that I can be like, okay, you compare Kendall Brown to these guys. They're playing well on a really good team. They just made the Western Conference Finals and the NBA Finals last season. Very valuable pieces. No team in the NBA wouldn't want a Kendall Brown. Right now, he's averaging about 14 points per game, 4 rebounds, a little over 2 assists, half a block, over a 1.5 steals per game. You mentioned the 72% from the floor, about 67% from deep. That's on a very small sample, 4 of 6. I think that's been the stat that's been thrown out of most in the listening and the reading that I've been doing a lot lately is they talk about the 3-point shooting and then they say, well, it's a small sample size, 4 of 6. I think it's a real shot, though. And if you look at the free throw percentage, it's a little over 71, which isn't great, but it's not terrible either. Richard, I want to ask you in particular about this shot. How real do you think it is?
Yeah, I think the form isn't bad. I think it's honestly a confidence thing. Like, he does need work in the form. It's not like good by any means, but I don't know. I feel like for him, the small sample size comes from the fact that he's really hesitant to shoot.
Yeah, for sure. And a guy that I listen to talk with a lot, and respect, Tyler Rucker over at No Ceilings.
Yep.
He just released a video actually covering Kendall Brown on a project that he's calling Prospects, just kind of an homage to Kobe Bryant and his detail videos. And in that video, he points at his shooting, and I've talked with him a little bit on the side. And one thing that he pointed out was he has a little bit of a gather that he almost has to get to before he's comfortable getting that shot off. It's not a ready-made shot to where he can just catch and release. He kind of has to, no matter where the ball is passed almost, Richard, he grabs it, has to do a little step out and then bring it back up. And then he's confident in it. That's obviously something I think that's fixable. How do you think that that's something that he can correct, Richard?
Yeah, I mean, that's honestly almost closer to and not a hitch, but like a nervous tick almost for him, I guess. That sounds like the wrong word to say, but like, you know what I mean, where it's just a habit he built, and I don't know, someone's gonna have to get rid of that. And thinking about it, like, the one thing I would say about his shot that is gonna be harder to fix is that it's just such a low release. Like, especially for someone his size, if he's going against any taller players, I mean, wings are very wide range of heights. It's gonna be a little bit easier to block.
Yeah, and I haven't, just to be honest, I'm going to be completely transparent. I haven't noticed the release point, but I know that you look at this, you look at these a lot, and I'm going to go back and just kind of revalidate what you said after the show, because it's something that I, for the life of me, just didn't catch on. So now I have something else I can look at when I watch Kendall Brown. So one more thing I want to ask you about Kendall Brown, Richard, is how much do you think that he's benefiting playing for Baylor right now? Do you think that do you think a lot of his success has to do with the system? Because let's be honest, Baylor, they're kind of tailor made for these, super athletic, defensive minded types, whether they're guards, wings, even sometimes bigs. If you're hyper athletic and a really solid defensive player, Baylor you can look really good playing for them. Do you think a lot of his success has to do with the system, or do you think that this is something that's going to translate well in other places?
To some extent, I almost would make like a counter argument to that of just flipping it upside its head, which is maybe everyone else is kind of benefiting from him to an extent because he makes so many of his teammates so much better. Excuse me. They don't really have like a true. I don't want to say LJ Cryer and Aquino aren't point guards, but like, they don't have a true like Jared Butler ball dominant or not ball dominant, pace dominant. Like he controls the game. They don't have anything like that, and I think that really makes Kendall Brown's game stick out. And because of that, because of who Kendall Brown is, he makes everyone else around him better. Like Jonathan Chachua is become an incredible role player, and I think a lot of it is because he can do so much and play his perfect role because Kendall Brown is there to play below him. Like, for example, and there's other examples, of course, but I just think that the roster construction is kind of 50-50. They give and take.
Yeah, and that's fair. And me personally, I don't think that it's so much of him benefiting from the ecosystem that he's in, but I have seen that argument be made, and I just think it's people looking for, something to poke at about him right now.
Yeah, I can agree with that. And there's never going to be a perfect prospect to anybody.
For sure. And I mean, if he was, I mentioned that I have him. Let me see here if I can pull it up. I have him 6th on my board right now. If he was perfect, he'd be number 1. But he's 6th right now, and there's some concerns for him. You mentioned that shot, a guy that we're going to be talking about next. No question about a shot right now. Talking about Hyunjung Lee. Really talented wing, can shoot the cover right off the ball. Richard, I'm so glad that you wanted to talk about Lee. We've mentioned him before on the show when we had Alberto Gim, also of No Ceilings on Draft Capital. He wanted to talk about him. We waxed poetic on him for a while. Love his game. Super excited to see what he does at the next level. I think he'll get a shot. Whether or not he's drafted is another story. What about Lee stands out to you? Is it only the shooting, or is there more to him than that?
So I think the shooting is like far and away the biggest selling point, but also he's a pretty good passer. I think he plays within the system. I don't think he's like some incredible like creative creator or anything, but I think it really starts with the shot. He can shoot from any angle. He can shoot on the catch, around screen, spot up, just simple jump shots on pull-up jump shots off the dribble. Like he's got it going. It's crazy because also, last year Trey Murphy was 50, 40, 90 in college, which is super rare.
Yeah.
The only people really to do it in the last 5 years were like Cassius Winston and like one other low major player. But then you had 2 last year, Trey Murphy and Hyunjung Lee, who got 51, 44, 90, and he's probably going to do it again because he's at 52, 44, 90 again. So if he does it twice, it's pretty hard to turn that down. And I personally think he's a better prospect than Trey Murphy is and was. Trey Murphy, I felt, was a one-trick pony who just shot threes. Lee, I don't think I can say the same. I really do think he's a better shooter with more creativity, just more fluidity and athleticism in his game than Murphy. Obviously, they play different positions, but I don't know. That's my stance on him.
Yeah, for sure. And you're talking about a guy who, in Murphy, who was, he was a good 3-point shooter, but also an incredible defender. Whereas Lee, on the other hand, that's probably the area that you're concerned about the most is, how well can he stay in front of wings at the next level? But I think with guards, though, Richard, and I would probably classify Lee more as a guard than I would a forward. Like, you're not going to put him on the other team's best scorer right at the next level. But you could theoretically he's not a short guy. He's 6'7", 210. There's a lot of guys that have smaller builds that play in the NBA or right now currently. I think that you could put him in an NBA scheme and he wouldn't be a net negative. I mean, I think at some point he could just be a passable defender. But then if you get a guy who's averaging, 19.7 rebounds, that's something there too. 2 assists and half a steal a game. And you mentioned the 50, 40, 90. You insert him into a system, there's a lot that you can do with a player like that, Richard.
Yeah, and I'm a Mavs fan. I've seen some terrible defenders get hidden by a good coach in Rick Carlisle. It's completely possible. He definitely needs the right team. Going to like obviously he's not there anymore, but like Sacramento with Luke Walton would have been a horrible disaster.
Of course.
So getting him in a good coach really does a lot for him. Honestly, I do like him in Indiana, especially if, and they want to move on from like Justin Holiday, something like that. They can easily replace him with someone who's a little bit more consistent.
Yeah, I mean, they've got issues with guys like Karis LeVert staying healthy. Yep. Malcolm Brogdon always seems to be primed in any sort of trade conversation when it comes to the Pacers, along with Miles Turner. I mean, those two are for whatever reason, Pacer fans or whoever works at the trade machine for them, they just don't like those two. So, I mean, you put a guy like Lee in there, it's something maybe you can sell fans on for a bright future. I'm looking through some of the places where I look to see where guys are kind of projected to be drafted coming into the season, right? And Draft Room had him as their 66th best prospect. Tankathon, DraftNet, Bleacher Report, and ESPN didn't have him listed at all. And then I look at the Athletic, respect the guys there, right? They have him number 28th overall. USA Today's For the Win had him at 50. I have him at 55 on my top 80. 28th for the Athletic. They do great work there, Richard. Just gut check feeling. I know that you have already made your thoughts perfectly clear on ranking prospects. I personally feel like that's too high, but I can see a world where he might be on, a high end second. I think that's probably the kind of the cap where I have on him right now. Is that fair? Do you think that I'm kind of limiting him too much?
No, I agree. I mean, he's not going to be a first round pick. But I have him. I think top 45 is going to be where I go with him. And that's probably going to end up in the 25-45 range just because like shooters, I underrate them a lot. I really am the first person, like my first thing with these lights out shooters is like, okay, what else can they do? Because like, especially this year, we're seeing it. What happens when your jump shot isn't falling? And I think Lee checks enough boxes where it's like, he still does plenty on the court. It won't necessarily be like Trey Murphy. And I realize I completely undersold his defense, but I mean, like, it's not going to be like, on the other end of the ball, you can do this, but when he's getting the ball and those shooting opportunities, if it's not falling, if he's over his first three or something, he's probably going to recognize, hey, maybe look for a teammate if they're closing out hard, something like that. I really love his game.
Yeah, I mean, ball on the floor ability with him is a lot more. I would definitely agree with you than Trey Murphy is, at least right now. Yeah. And the passing game for a shooter, it's pretty solid. And again, rebounding. I think there's a lot of really good wing rebounders in this class. If you looking at just guys in general. But we'll transition now to a guy who I think is an all right rebounder, a guy who had a pretty good showing earlier in the season in the tournament that he played in, Adama Sanogo. I wanted to talk about this one. This was the guy that I brought to the table because he's a little bit polarizing for me. I fell in love with him watching him play against some really high-end teams. He's kind of fell off a little bit since then. And on my top 80, I have him 75th right now. But still, I like to talk about fringe guys because everybody's going to talk about, Chet and Paolo and all that stuff. And that's all well and good, and they deserve a lot of conversation. But I kind of like these fringy guys too. Richard, for Adama Sanogo, how do you feel about him? Do you think that he's a draftable prospect right now?
So, first of all, you're talking to someone who absolutely loves the fringe prospects. So, no problem there. Personally, I would say no. I'm not too high on him. I think he's got a little bit too much of a green light. He's not a good enough rebounder, and I don't trust the shot. And especially because he'd probably play 4 or 5, he probably has to shoot, and his shot is just not it. Like he's taking 2 jump shots. I want to say that he took a 3 and a 2. I vividly remember he took a 3 in the battle for Atlantis. I want to say maybe against Auburn. And then the other jump shot, I can't remember which game it was, but he took like between the free throw line and the 3-point line. So kind of that long too. And it looked a little bit better, but I mean, it's just not smooth at all. It's not something he's not shooting in the NBA. If he declares this year, he's not shooting until 2025, like threes, if he's around by then.
No, for sure. And you look at his percentages right now, big goose egg at the 3-point, percentage. He hasn't put up a lot, but obviously, the ones that he's put up are not there. 55% from the floor, 76% though from the free throw line, Richard. I mean, are you one of these guys that looks at a free throw percentage as an indicator that there's something to build upon there? I myself am more of a case by case, right? Like it depends on how the shot looks at the free throw line and how quickly you get it up compared to, in real life, being covered, a contested shot, so to speak.
Yeah, I'm the same way. It's case by case. Like I think Scotty Barnes had a pretty gross free throw percentage, and I'm not going to say I was like right on him because I still underrated him, but I definitely saw more jump shooting potential than whatever he averaged. It was like 58 to like 65 range, and usually like if you're below 70, like it's pretty much, for those who don't know, like so 70%. It's all relative to position. Like a big man who shoots 68%, not the worst thing. A guard who shoots 68% from the line, that's a very worrisome flag. If you're below 74, 73, pretty much as a wing or a guard, it's a red flag for shooting. Davion Mitchell, someone who kind of comes to mind as exception to the rule. He couldn't ever break 65% from the line. Sometimes it's mental. That's why I do case by case as well, like you.
Mm-hmm.
And but for Sanogo, the free throw percentage is nice. I've seen guys like with gross jump shots, Deontay Maiden at Georgia a few years ago shot like 88, 89%, something like that, and had one of the ugliest jump shots and could not shoot it. So that's I think it's gonna be closer to that than someone who likes is Scotty Barnes.
No, for sure. I mean, there's a difference between someone running right at you on a closeout, putting it up, than you getting 8 seconds to get up whatever Cole Aldridge esque form of a jump shot up there, and if it goes in, it goes in, and that's great. Your coach is happy at the end of the day, but the form is a little bit in question. I'll agree with you there, but the scoring around the basket I think is nice, and it doesn't always translate, right? Like there's always college bigs that look good around the basket. I mean, Luka Garza last year, player of the year candidate, and barely was a second round draft pick this season. And you look at the preseason and a couple, minutes here or there, you kind of see why, right? Do you think that Adama kind of fits that type of a role, or do you think that he could potentially be a good dive man?
Yeah, I think he's going to be more of a back to the basket guy with some, pick and roll man. But I think he's going to make a living being that kind of mid-post guy. And maybe his best case is probably being a play finisher of some sort where he's not, doing the whole creation thing on his own. So I think it's going to be a little bit of a mixture, but leaning towards kind of honestly just 50-50. I really can't even make up my mind.
No, for sure. And like you said earlier, it's like an 8-game sample size. These guys have plenty of time to prove us right or wrong, or whichever way they decide to go, right? One thing about that offensive around the basket game that he does have, I noticed that he loves, this little push hook kind of jumper. It's never really like a straight up and down, let me muscle you, maybe bump a shoulder into you, create some space. He loves this kind of like turn, float, jump hooker. It's really funky looking shot, but it goes in. And I couldn't help but think of I kind of relate that to Pascal Siakam's spin move. You know how everyone he's got memes for days with the one move that he's really good at, and it goes in. But sometimes, if you have that one move, teams can fall in love with that. But obviously, I don't think that he's at that draftable level yet either. I have him 75th on my top 80. As much as I fell in love with him during that tournament, I saw a little bit of potential in him. And again, he could prove me wrong. I would love for that, because personally, I like him a lot more emotionally than I have him on my top 80. So, Richard, before we get out of here, man, I just wanted to thank you so much for making time to come on Draft Capital. Really love all the work that guys like you, Raphael, and Sam are all doing over there at the Locked On Podcast Network. I listen to Chad Ford all the time too, the OG. I mean, you can't not listen to Chad, right? Yeah. But before we go, man, just thank you so much for coming on, and I would love for you to tell the listeners where they can find you and your work, and maybe some stuff that you have coming up.
Yeah, hey, thank you so much for having me. I know, like you said at the beginning, we've had a lot more recent interactions, and dude, love your stuff on Twitter. So it's a pleasure coming on here. Yeah, for stuff I've got coming up though, I do every first Tuesday of the month. If it's coming next Tuesday, it's the 1st of December. I do college basketball recaps for what the last month has been with Leaf Tulane, who has been on my show just plenty. He used to do Locked On NBA Draft way back when. Okay. And so, yeah, doing that every first Tuesday of the month. I have that. So going to be doing a lot of college basketball content. And then, maybe come New Year's Eve or so, around there, New Year's, I'll post my big board.
Okay, fair enough. And hey, I'm sorry, just real quick while I got you here. This is nothing that we scripted, so you can tell me to kick rocks if you want. TCU, I know that you're a fan of Mike Miles, yeah? Yeah. Just a little bit. I want to hear about him. I know this wasn't a guy that we had scripted, but just I have him as a draftable guy. I have him kind of like middle second round right now. Obviously, could climb much higher. Big fan of his game. Just indulge the listeners and myself, if you would, just a little bit about on his game and why you like him so much.
Yeah, so I'll try and do this within a minute. I'm going to do a quick rundown. So pretty much with Mike Miles, he was a 4-star recruit out of Lancaster, really flew under the radar, had a great start to his freshman year, kind of got figured out come February. So the final month of the season, teams figured it out. He was probably a little bit worn out having to do everything for the team. But he's 6'1", probably has no longer than a 6'3" wingspan, I would say. So not exactly the most desirable measurables, but he's a really good rebounder, incredibly high IQ basketball player, especially on the defensive end. He's not afraid to rise up and be a help side defender because he's athletic. His jump shot is super smooth. He can shoot out to the logo, spot up off the dribble. Doesn't really matter. He can change direction with ease. He loves going to the basket. He does not fear contact. Last night, I saw him against Max. I still don't even know how to say his name. I've watched him so many times.
Oral Roberts, yeah. Was
Matt, the point guard from Oral Roberts.
Abramus, am I saying it right? I don't
It's like Amos Neesmith. It sounds like Neesmith. That's all I remember.
Okay.
And
I know who you're talking about, though.
Yeah, of course. And he took him off the dribble, met the help side defender at the rim multiple times. The best way I can describe, I guess, why I'm so high on him, even though he's been actually statistically pretty bad to start the year, I don't think it's that bad. One, because Desmond Bane had a very similar start to his senior year.
Sure.
Was really bad in the out of conference and then just lit everyone in the Big 12 up. And I think you could see something start with that with Mike Miles come January, maybe even the end of this month, where he was on the U19 team, played with Chet Holmgren, Patrick Baldwin, all the top prospects that were freshmen this year. And that might have something to do with him. Maybe a little bit of like needs to get his rhythm chemistry with the team that had like 8 new transfers. There's a lot going on. So I'm not too worried about this horrible early start. Last night, though, he started 0 for 10, which I know I cannot probably raise your hopes from that awful stat, but he had 6 assists to 2 turnovers. The 2 turnovers were one the ref should have easily called a foul. He was getting tangled up and just slapped all over. And the other was he just lost the ball. It wasn't really anything like, it was just a slip. But the next 8 shots, he went 5 of 8, was hitting consistent threes, getting to the rim, just really comfortable doing whatever. And that to me was more important than the first 10 shots. The last 8 were way more significant than the first 10. So if you have a chance to watch him, I'd highly recommend it. The one thing I'd love to see him do to really improve his stats this year is just reduce the use of the floater. And that's pretty much it. His biggest flaw is probably being undersized.
Fair enough. And I got more than a minute out of you. So
yeah, I realized I said that I probably tripled my time.
No, it's all good. And I appreciate you indulging me on that kind of audible that I called here. But Richard, I'll get you out of here, man. I just thank you so much for, giving us a little bit of time here on Draft Capital on the Nothing But Net channel on Dash Radio. Chris couldn't be here today. He really wanted to talk to you, but he's going to listen to the episode. I'm sure he's going to have nothing but glowing reviews on how well you did and how much he appreciated you coming on as well. But for all the folks and listeners, thank you all so much for tuning in. Please tune in to the Locked On Podcast Network. Listen to guys like Raphael, Richard, Sam, all those guys. Chad Ford, the OG, just had a great episode with Howard Beck. And it talked about, Scoot over there at the G League Ignite. That was a fun episode. But for us here on the Draft Capital Show, for my awesome guest, Richard Stayman, for myself, for Built Bar, this has been Draft Capital, and we'll catch up with you guys next time. Much love, everybody.